up everywhere.
So, okay, we're live. Hey, everybody, Larry Powell here, Studio HFL, and going to welcome everybody in. I know it's going to take a while for people to kind of stream in here, but you know, this has been already a fun week. This has been what I've called the Industry Pro Showcase, and I started out with, you know, this is all because we can't go to a physical music ed conference and talk to exhibitors and friends. So this is kind of my idea of bringing everybody to you, bringing these guys to you. Of course, I started out with Trent Austin Monday night. That was a hoot. Tuesday night, Ricky Riccardi, and then I had Doc pop in halfway through, and that just was that was a treat. Last night I had Peter Pickett and Eric Murine, and you know, we nerded out on trumpets and mouthpieces. That was great. Of course, tonight I've got Wiff Rudd, and I'm thrilled for this next little bit, man. I'm so excited about this. Of course, then tomorrow we've got 2 more sessions. Tomorrow, Carl Hammond, and I'm gonna say we're gonna find out if everything is better in HD tomorrow night. And then Messina covers, David Messina, Erica Howard, Saturday night to round out everything. And they've been friends. I've talked to them, and I think it was such a fascinating part of the industry. You know, we think about mouthpieces and trumpets, but you know, cases themselves, you know, it's kind of a neat thing. But there's more than just cases. We'll talk about there. So, anyways, all these interviews are going to end up both on YouTube and on the podcast. So if you've missed the previous 3 nights, don't worry, you can find it. They're all already uploaded on the Studio HFL YouTube channel. If you make your way there, please subscribe. And of course, the audio is available on the podcast. So I'm Larry Powell. I'm the host, and like a kid in a candy store, sitting here talking to all these great people. And so here's my first experience with Wiff Rudd, who's sitting right here in front of you. My first experience with was probably, you're going to have a better idea of the year, mid to late 90s, Indianapolis, Indiana, rhythm and brass. You guys, myself, my wife, my mother-in-law, and my oldest son, we're sitting there and absolutely blown away. It was like nothing. I mean, I'd seen Canadian brass, fantastic. I had seen Empire live, fantastic. You guys were different. And
a little different.
But I mean, I was so excited. And there was a tune, there were several, but there was a tune called Caravan where I remember, who was the trombone player in the group?
Tom Brantley.
He turned back upstage toward and just started wailing. And I mean, that was the kind of energy in that group. And, you know, you guys did so many different things. And of course, it's the first time I'd ever heard about Rex. And it was Villarubia, right? And
Charles Villarubia,
Shuhan, Alex
Shuhan, triple threat, you know, with horn and piano. And he's funny.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, that was my first experience. And then, like I was telling you just a few minutes ago, I saw you at Ball State University. You came and did a master class and a clinic and a recital.
Big trumpet day. I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. And I came up, Stephen Campbell's a friend of mine. I came up and checked it out. But you did, the one I remember was Stanley Friedman's Solace.
Love that piece.
I mean, you owned it. It was.
Well, thanks.
it was one of the coolest things I had heard. So that's my experience with you, and of course, not just those reasons, but I mean, this is great timing because you have just put a book out side by side. This right here. Let's see if I can get a glare not on there. If you guys don't have a copy of this book yet, you need to get it. It's spectacular. The writing is fantastic. The content is fantastic. The ideals are, I agree with everything in it. So you guys can disagree with me if you want to.
Wait a minute.
So
read that again.
Yeah. Anyways, that's a very long-winded, but this is to show, you know, I mean, this is kind of my background and my admiration for what you've done. I've seen you and heard you as a performer. I've read you as an author. The only thing I don't know yet is you as an educator. So maybe we'll find out a little bit about that as well. So I want you to give us a little bit of insight, but here's the formal Wiff Rudd welcome
Thank you
to the
very
show.
much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wow. Well, the names are popping up.
Yeah, right.
Hey,
Derek
Karen. Hey, Mark.
Watson. Are these people? Oh, Bruce Faskey. I know him. Of course,
Yeah,
Jennifer
Bruce,
Powell. That's my
Andrea,
wife
and
there.
Derek. That's great.
This is great.
That's great. Well,
So
thank you for
yeah,
doing this. Yeah,
yeah.
I've been looking forward to this, and I've really enjoyed your other interviews. And I told Tony Plogue that you and I'd spoken, and I think he was one of your first
I think he was
interviews.
number 6 or number 7. Yeah.
Yeah, and he just had a ball, and Tony and I have a lot of discussions about a lot of things. But anyway, he sends his greetings. But thank you for doing this. Yeah, I appreciate it.
You bet. So some background about you as a performer, maybe start there first.
Sure. Well, a lot of people know my story, but I'm a Texas boy. I kind of grew up in the Texas system, not in a musical family other than, I was the 5th of 6 children, and we all went through at least a year of piano. I wish I'd stuck with it now, but I barely made it through the year when I was 6 years old. And but trumpet I was just kind of drawn to it in the 6th grade. That's when you start in Texas. And I didn't really study it. I just enjoyed being in band, and I was just a kid in Texas. And things kind of started happening in high school, and I was having fun with it and kind of finding my people, and then we moved, which was a little bit harsh, right in the middle of high school. So we moved to San Antonio, and I had the very good fortune for 2 years of studying quite by accident with a gentleman named Bill Snyder. And Bill had been principal trumpet of the San Antonio Symphony, and he was a Ernest Williams student. And just a phenomenal, Ernest Williams students were just special, Ray Crisera, the list is incredibly long.
Mm-hmm.
And I just enjoyed lessons and just tried to sound like him. And it was time to look at going to school and doing something. And I couldn't think of anything but music. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, who were the influences as you're going through 6th, 7th grade, and you're starting to listen to, if you're going to say Maynard, I guess everybody would expect that, right? But I'm hoping that you're going to have some other.
But really, for me, it was Al Hirt and Doc Severinsen, And I remember they were the halftime of the Super Bowl,
Mm-hmm.
That was my era. And Herb Alpert had, I think it was 3 primetime television specials, 30-minute specials. And I had my reel-to-reel tape recorder on my little mic and trying to keep everybody quiet because there were no jacks and direct recording. So that's how I record. I remember recording the theme of Mannix because it was just a great jazz tune and great playing. But it was Al Hirt and Doc Severinsen and some Herb Alpert, and then of course seeing Doc on TV. And then I started learning about other players, but I didn't really study music or know about music. I just enjoyed it, and I'm just so thrilled that it was what I pursued in college, but I didn't know what I was doing. And, in Texas, all states like a really big deal. And when I was a freshman, I did well in the region bands, and everybody said, "Oh man, you're going to be an all-stater your sophomore year." I was just like, well, what is that?
Mm-hmm.
So I felt this pressure to, I just enjoyed playing. Suddenly there's pressure to advance or whatever. And the next year I really didn't do any better. And the next year I did worse. So I just kind of I wasn't working out because I worked hard and I learned the music, but when it came to performing, I would just shake like a leaf. And I always say in clinics, how can my mouth be so dry and my hands so wet?
Right?
Could we reverse that? But it was my senior year where the lights kind of came on, and I started to just play for the joy of playing and getting ready for college. And I wasn't that much of a better player. And when it comes to auditions at any level, the results may be, if you could do the same audition 5-6 days in a row, some of the results would be very similar and some of the results would be quite different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never a point of bragging, but how does a kid who doesn't do anything his junior year make first chair senior year? And the answer was I prepared hard and I just didn't care that much because it wasn't going to go well, right? So I decided not to care as much. There's a whole sermon in that somewhere, but the senior year in college, in high school, was really this is what I want to do, and of course, it was quite a journey after that.
What was it, a music ed or performance, or what was your
So,
focus in
you
college?
know, I kind of grew up in this time where people said you needed to do music ed, so you'd have something to fall back on. I don't like that phrase, but I knew that I'd be getting married as a young man, and I did. We got married in the middle of my junior year. I knew I wanted to be in music. My goal, my dream, was to be a university teacher someday and a performer, because I was looking at my teacher in college, Mike Ewald, who was
Mm-hmm.
just wonderful, and that's what he was doing. And I thought that's a great job, but I also thought I need to be able to support a family, and I I enjoyed teaching. So I got the music ed degree and acted like a performance major, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
A lot of
absolutely.
people
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
And just trying to be prepared. And the more I stayed in music, I started to realize that if you're going to be a performer, you have to really go for it, of course. And if you're going to do education, do it because you love it, not because something else didn't work out.
So
You know, yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was going to say, as a performer, are you drawn to the orchestral stuff or the soloist or chamber? What was your focus with that?
Yeah, I do enjoy soloing, but I think especially because of my early outings, being such a nervous young player, I was always drawn to small group playing. I loved quintet all the way through college. Always was in a quintet. Have always been in a quintet or mixed chamber music and orchestral playing, of course. And I certainly went through that phase of I want to play trumpet in a major symphony orchestra. And I could talk about some of those outings, but I now wish I had thought in terms of I want to have a meaningful career in music, hopefully with the trumpet. And it was a potential recruit that said that in an audition one time. It was so refreshing because, to be young and to say, I'm going to be the next principal trumpet of this orchestra is kind of limiting. It's pretty lofty but it's kind of like, well, there might be some things out there that you might miss out on if that's it.
Mhm.
Now, for those who have gone that career route and have those skills, that's kind of what you have to do. But these are interesting times in music. And I'm more of the thinking that there are possibilities out there. I mean, I think about my life in rhythm and brass. It was not a dream come true. It wasn't my
Really?
dream. In
Oh,
college, I never thought about that. And what if I hadn't gone a little bit different route and investigated that? I mean, the dreams I think have to be updated with what we know about, and
well,
I
and
think
you
it can
may not
be.
know what that dream, what you really
Yeah,
want to have yet, right? I mean, when you're young and less experience, right? I mean, your dream has to expand because you grow, right? I mean,
right,
that's exactly
exactly.
what you're talking about. That's what's happening.
Yeah, it's kind of like be ready because you never know. I mean, I had a wonderful time in my first job. Briefly, I went to Baylor. It's a joy teaching where I went to school and never expected that. That was not my dream. And yet if I look back now, it's like, wow, what a surprise.
Hmm.
Working with Bill Fund for my master's was phenomenal. And my first job was a small university, Oklahoma Baptist University. And what an amazing situation. 30 minutes to a really serious gigging town. Ended up
Hmm.
playing big bands, recording studios. I mean, all my little dreams, could I be an orchestra player? Could I be a studio player? Well, I didn't go to LA. I didn't play in the New York Philharmonic, but I was in Oklahoma City
Hmm.
doing all those things on the side. It was really exciting. And it was really a concert with the Canadian Brass. The first time I saw Canadian Brass was at the University of Oklahoma. Drove the 30 or 40 minutes. And I left that going, I didn't know you could do that and make a living doing that. It was not my dream. But within months, I auditioned for Dallas Brass. And who would know that for the next 13, and then with part-time years, next 18, 20 years would do that kind of work. So yeah, it's about being prepared. And I think
You know,
musicians now, must really think about that, and don't close doors before they have the chance to open up.
Well, I think about this. I mean, now as an educator, you're sitting there and a student comes to you and says, they want to talk about the studio. You can talk about the studio. They want to talk about touring with a small group. You can talk about it, right? I mean, I believe all of this happens to give us the experience to empathize and relate to
Absolutely.
students. Right. And I mean, we're getting into your book now, right? This is referring to
You're
a lot of what you
absolutely
talk
right,
about.
though, because don't we teach from our experience? You know,
Mhm.
and if you're a young teacher, because I have them somewhere, the reject letters from my first college job applications. I mean, that's a big pile. And, the common response was, well, you're too young, you don't have enough experience. And that was really true. But on the other hand, I'm so fortunate that the folks who hired me first saw I was affordable. Okay. The guy's his wife's pregnant. He needs a job. He's getting out of grad school. But I think they saw the sensibilities
Mhm.
that maybe thanks to my teachers and parents and my support network that were hopefully in place, and they nurtured that,
Mhm. Mhm.
And then I got that taste for wanting to perform more and more, getting brave, more and more brave. And that's not easy for an introvert. Seeing
Mhm.
Canadian brass going, oh, is that possible? And then quitting a tenured job to do that was a little scary.
But you wouldn't change a thing, would you?
No, no. And this is where, we talk about all this is so based upon relationships. And I have to salute my wife, Jeanette. She's out of town right now, but she may be here. But she's, as I say in the beginning of the book, she's the one that was willing to take running jumps off cliffs with me because of a gut feeling.
Mhm.
She's lucky that gut feelings only came around every 7 to 10 years. So
There's something to that 7-year cycle.
yeah, that's right.
I just here's another thing I admire about people like you. It's you don't get somewhere and become stagnant. You don't just settle down and teach. You are always striving to improve yourself. I mean, the book is evidence of that. The fact that you're writing about this and you're showing how deeply you think about it. I mean, this is not your your terminal. Is that the right? This is not the it for you,
I'm,
right? This is just yet
yeah, yeah.
another stepping, not even a stepping stone, another landmark along the way, right? You're continuing to grow, and I think that students pick up on that. If I remember in particular an education psychology class I took in a bachelor's degree, where the
Mm.
professor, this is back when they were notepads, there were no computers. Well, there were computers, right? But the notepad, I think, was so yellowed from the 30 years of teaching the same thing over and over. It was his job. He was doing it over and over. There was nothing new. It was all by rote, and it just became monotonous for the students, for us as well. Yeah, but
Right.
I
That's
don't
right.
sense that with people like you who are continually moving forward.
Yeah, and I didn't know how to express those things as a younger teacher or performer, and I have to. I look back a lot on the conversations with my rhythm and brass colleagues. We had a lot of time on airplanes and on vans, and lots of adventures and great times, and lots of disagreements and great reconciliation and wonderful concerts. There's no telling what went on the day of the concert that you witnessed, but our day was always in the music. And we talked a lot. And I think it was our drummer, Dave Gluck, when he just mentioned one time the difference between recreating and creating. And honestly, a lot of my early teaching was trying to just help students recreate. Let's recreate the Haydn. Let's recreate
Mm.
something that's been done over and over again. And that's an important part of the process. But where do we come in?
Mhm.
And that's the creative side. And I guess it's two different sides of the brain. I'm no expert, but it seems like we can flip back and forth very, very easily. What happens when a student comes in and they're uncomfortable or distressed or worried, but maybe through some distraction. The art of distraction is an important skill for teachers to to develop.
Mm-hmm.
Some people do it very instinctually. Some people have no idea what we're talking about. What can you do to get the student out of that side into the other? And it's through a game, playing a musical game. It's through getting them to laugh. I have a student right now, and I finally made them laugh in a lesson. And I don't know which lesson it was, number 10, number 15, but they laughed. And I said, I made you laugh, finally. I mean, this is, I think I put it in the book, Victor
Yeah.
Borger said that, the laughter is the shortest distance between two people. It's the glue, or shared sadness. That's the glue. So it's that creative versus recreative. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to just keep doing the same thing. I see some of the former students chiming in. I see somebody, Bill Kestinger from grad school, Bill and I haven't talked in years. And, but he was such a creative, amazing musician. And we always need to be growing and changing.
Another one here, Andy Lott. Of course, Andy's principal trumpet
Yeah.
Fort Wayne Philharmonic. And, I've had the good fortune to work with Andy here in the studios in Indianapolis. And I've assisted him in the Fort Wayne Phil. And I have a video of us in the recording studio, and he's going to kill me for telling this. And I still have this video, but we were recording.
Share a screen.
Well, we were recording Sweet Caroline, and he didn't know it was a real take, and so he started singing along, right, instead of playing his part. Yeah, there you go, Andy.
1921.
Yeah. So, but Andy's a heck of a player. But I mean, there is somebody. I mean, when you can tell the reverence they have for their teacher when you came up, and almost every time I encountered Andy, and of course I knew that you would come in. Well, sometimes I didn't get to play up there because he brought you into play with the orchestra. So I'm a little jealous of that, but I can understand. I'll let it slide. But I can see that with Andy and Bruce Faskey. I don't know if Bruce.
Bruce did his master's at Baylor.
Yeah, okay, so there's the connection there. Well, he plays down in the Owensboro Symphony, so we're colleagues. Right. We've played down there, and we are a terrific guy, terrific trombone player. So we're just making the world smaller right now, right? It's getting smaller and smaller. But this is a great segue right into your book, because you don't start out right away talking about community, but it is early on in the book, and it's such a significant part of the book. And when we talked a few days ago, you said you can kind of pick it up and read it out of order. But to me, I think that maybe you ought to change that and say you need to read that chapter first, because I do. I think it's key to understanding how the rest of the book ties together. And so talk a little bit about the community and creating this sense of togetherness.
Well, thank you for asking about that. And actually early on, with a couple of the drafts or the outlines, I ran it by several people, and somebody, meaning well, said, I think this is a different thing. I think that's do that in an article or do another book, but I think people want to hear about your teaching. So I kind of tried, but I couldn't write the rest of the book without talking about how do you set the stage for teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been really blessed in this career and in life. And it wouldn't happen without certain relationships having taken place, and people who are willing to strive to have a relationship with me as a young student or a young professional. And I was just figuring stuff out, and they were so gracious and patient,
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't write about how to teach without talking about what it means to be together in community. And there are a couple of silly stories in there about my Dallas neighbor that I tried to become a neighbor for 4 years. And he walked over to say goodbye when we were loading up to move away. And he said, "You guys are great neighbors." And I said, "No, we weren't. We tried. And what could we have enjoyed? What kind of sips on the lawn could we have enjoyed in discussions if we had just hung out a little bit?" So, and my colleague, Mark Schubert, he and I team teach the studio. Mark is just a wonderful colleague. And he speaks a lot, and I've absorbed so much, and his thoughts are in the book too about, trumpet's not that hard if the heart and the mind are right. If we can get a relationship, if we can get trust, if we're um, joyful, grateful, that's a big one.
Hmm.
We're not always happy. We're not always going to be happy, but we can be joyful and we can be expectant. It's not just optimism. It's just knowing that you're in this with people moving along. If we can get a student there, and if I can be there, we can do the work. We can do the work.
I know my wife is watching this, but something you just said, I'm surprised I'm not hearing her just jump up and down, talking about this, but about being joyful. That's something that well, she's a violinist, but she's also a designer and screen printer, and she's about putting that kind of stuff out there, so she's got
Yeah.
this, she's got stuff about joy, and I'm thinking, man, she's going to need to make you a studio shirt about that.
Okay.
This was not meant to turn into shameless self-promotion, but if that's where
She's
we end
jumping in
up,
the other
okay.
room, she said.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So yeah, but the community, and of course, I don't want to gloss over this, but there's so much out of this book. The other chapter that, well, there are two other chapters that really were significant to me. One was on leadership, and the other, I'm taking my time and make a game plan, and I have to because it's a really long chapter. But
Yeah, that's a long chapter for
but
sure. It's a long game.
and what struck me in that particular chapter was this really great conversation about underachievement and grading. How do we assess? Not how do we assess, but how do we get the students to assess their progress and what their expectations are? To me, that's something I've struggled with as a teacher. Is do you create a rubric? I mean, it's can be such an objective thing, right?
Yeah.
So how do you maybe talk a little bit about that, if you would?
Yeah, it's really tough assessing music, and improvement. We know what it's like to have a student come into a jury and to know the student so well and to hear the amazing progress they've done, but maybe it's not up to what the faculty who haven't heard them play in a semester, or they've heard them play in ensembles, but not a solo or something.
Mm-hmm.
And you read the comments, it's kind of like, well, where I'm coming from in assessing a student is so different than where somebody else who's just assessing. That's kind of A, B, or C playing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To me, if there's remarkable improvement and in focus, I mean, you have to assess the effort, but I think the big challenge, and it's so hard to assess music because it's so abstract, it's the most abstract of all the arts. And it's such a, we all have different feelings about what we hear, or different sensibilities. I think the main thing is to build the expectations with the students, and I talk a lot about bringing students in and asking what they want to achieve. That's kind of how we'll start next week in our lessons. I'll get out the sticky note. What do you want? What is this semester? What do you want it to look like?
Mm-hmm.
But have them kind of forecast how they want to work. And then we do have certain things that we grade for, like the attendance to our warm up. It's going to be 10% of the grade,
Mm-hmm.
And the quality of their project, and then the average of their jury grades. But grading is tough. It's tough, and I've tried all the systems.
Yeah.
You always think that you're fixing it, and but I think communication. If my students are watching, what we'll do this semester is we're going to assess each week, and we're going to agree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we can see if our expectations are in the same place.
I'm thinking, I teach at the University of Indianapolis, and last semester was a challenge. I had 3 freshmen, and I'm thinking, this is my perspective, what an absolute horrible time to be a freshman in college, especially in music, and to have done so much virtually. And so when it came time to grade their lessons, that changed from previous semesters, because well, unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures, right? I mean,
That's right.
I mean, this was it, but you have to show mercy in a situation like
Yeah.
that, right? I mean, it's difficult on you and me and them. That was, and this next semester may not be any better. If there's a lot of virtual teaching and learning going
Yeah,
on,
that's right.
it's such a challenge. I see some of the comments over here, people agreeing with me and you, and boy, that's a nice thing to see. I'm going to cut and paste all the agreeing statements, like, well, Derek Watson. Well, it can't be the Derek Watson, right? For the
Well,
British
yeah,
trumpet player,
he was amazing. Yeah,
uh,
so was
but
Derek Watson.
or that was Watkins. That was Derek Watkins.
Watkins.
That's, yeah, I was
Yeah,
close.
First Brass is the favorite album of mine that he played. I was just brass, and it's an amazing album, First Brass. Oh,
Well, Derek, I'm going to get back to you in a second, but I only discovered Derek for myself a couple of years ago. Of course, found out, oh, he's the guy that played all the James Bond stuff. And
phenomenal.
then I find all these videos, some of them kind of dated, but I
Yeah,
mean,
in the studio and everything. Yeah,
phenomenal player, right? I mean, all and just chops for days. It's like he was one of the most
yeah.
efficient players. But all right, Derek Watson, not Watkins. So is this a former student or a colleague of yours?
No,
Okay, so
no, but we're
Derek,
friends on
welcome.
Facebook. Yeah,
Leadership chapter is brilliant. Do what is right. Don't seek credit. Man, those are powerful statements. It's the motivation, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't seek. Yeah, I'm looking for. Yeah, don't seek credit. I think he's talking about leaders taking the
Right.
credit for things.
Yeah.
And it's so tempting. Like right now we're doing our annual reports, and so we have to, catalog all of our activities, which my external activities kind of stopped on March 13th. So it's a little easier to fill out the form this year. But, we also talk about student achievement. And, I love it when somebody does well in an audition for an orchestra or military band, and every school that they went to is putting up the banner. And we do it too. We should, because we're applauding the student. We all kind of want a piece of the pie for the student's achievement. But I always say our job is to provide opportunity and to answer questions that are asked. And there's a whole chapter on answering questions that are never asked, the unquestioned answer, we call that.
Yeah.
But when it's something great is going on and there's achievement, the students did the work. And
Well,
I think we need to just recognize that.
there's obviously more going on at Baylor than just football or basketball, right? I mean,
Not much football. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well,
We'll be back.
I don't know.
Basketball, yes.
Well, I'm a UK fan, so our football team is not that great either. But okay, so you talk about achievement, and I think obviously all these things we're talking about, the building of community, the leadership, and all this other stuff in the book, your experience has created something at Baylor that is becoming obvious to people outside, right? They're seeing your groups go to NTC, and not just go to NTC. I mean, you guys kind of you're starting to rule the roost over there. But there are and very successful people coming out of your studio, and we can talk about that definition of success too, right? That doesn't always mean with the horn.
That's right.
But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about this, because this all has to work for a trumpet ensemble to achieve what they've been achieving. And I know it's not the same personnel every year, right? So there has to be this building of understanding what the culture should be. So
yeah, and and we could spend the rest of the time on that. But one of the things that it dawned on me, probably after my first 6 or 7 years, when the ball was kind of rolling, it takes a while. And I talk about that a lot in the book. I didn't just, recruiting's not easy at first in any new job. And, but things were starting to roll. And I started to think that whether they're music ed or performance majors, we're all performers, we're all teachers. So let's all get on board with both of those ideas. And I thought it was time to move into we have to be project driven. I mean, that's why I wrote a book. That's why I'm doing all these other things. We thrive if we have projects. So I thought we should look at the marketplace. What are the opportunities for students to grow? What does the marketplace offer? And National Trumpet Competition, International Trumpet Guild, they offer all kinds of opportunities. So we just started to build some of those things into the curriculum or into the plan for the year. And there's a place in the book that I just show kind of our structure. It's very different right now. The priorities have shifted with the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to get through this and be prepared for open doors, right?
Right.
But just as soon as we started just creating these little projects, the work that we had done to that point of trying to build community and improvising together and just learning to hang out and play well together started to show up in their trumpet ensemble work. And the thing that struck me the most when I started listening to trumpet ensembles was that some of them weren't very pretty, to put it mildly. It's like the perception sometimes is trumpet is all fanfare. But as we know, trumpet is fanfare, song, and dance.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started thinking about pieces or doing arrangements or finding works that had those elements, especially the song part. The trumpet is a beautiful sounding instrument in the right hands. And Mike Ewald taught me this. We were talking about some of these things. Maybe I was a freshman, but he said, people will always remember a beautiful trumpet player. I know higher, faster, louder, and all that stuff, but
well, not anymore, right? It's here from legends.
That's right. But there's something compelling. I mean, why is it that John Williams, he chose Tim Morrison and he wrote those solos and they're gripping and they are inspiring and they're reflective. Listen to Tom Roths and Tim on Saving Private Ryan. I mean, that's a big part of the trumpet now. We're not just fanfare folks. And there's something about the dance quality, the lightness. As Charles Ruby would say, guys, we got to get off the page. Mm-hmm. Get off the page. Don't put the music back on the page. And that's the dance. So we just started thinking in those terms. And then I think getting back to my high school experience, when I tried hard, I didn't do well. And when I prepared well and didn't put too much weight on the success or the perception of success, I always did better. My best auditions in college were when I didn't care so much. Sounds terrible to say don't care. You do care, but it's not life or death. It's just an audition. So it finally dawned on me that I can't perform if I'm competing with myself or anybody else. I can't. Now, some people, they have the opposite personality and they thrive on that competition. But I think one of the keys for our students over time in competition has been to don't go in there to compete, go perform. I don't think young musicians can do both at the same time really well. When you perform, then you're naturally competing well. If you're competing, wondering how you're doing, you're not thinking about the music, you're not performing. And I say that because I've witnessed that with our own students and I've seen them turn on a dime. I mean, some of these groups that have done well could hardly get through the piece 3 days before. Mm-hmm. And they finally gave up trying so hard and could play it. Or I saw a group that probably should have done really well. And from lunch, walking to the stage, I started hearing them about tuning chords. And I thought, that's it.
Yeah, that's in the book.
They're going to try to play in tune.
Yeah.
That's competing.
Yeah. Well, and that comes with experience. I mean, of course we learn from the great experiences, but the downs can be just as valuable.
Very
right.
important.
I mean, it's like, student teaching with a really poor teacher. I mean, might not be the greatest experience, but you're going to look back at some point and be grateful. It's like, I know what not to do. I know how not to, to behave.
It reminds me of my first day of student teaching when I was at Baylor, and I walked into the junior high band room and couldn't find the band director. And they said the office is there. And I walked in and his feet were on the desk and there was a book and it said real estate exam guide, study guide. And he went, page 32, you can use my baton. And that was it.
Oh my gosh.
So
Wow.
I know not what to do in the junior high band room.
Well, we're going to take a little bit of a left turn here, and we talked a little bit about this the other day. I was asking if it was okay to talk about this, because it's not always sunshine and roses.
That's right.
And you have, not just you and Baylor, but the musical community at large, the Air Force band community has experienced something, a tragedy in the last, I don't know, maybe 6-8 months with Sally Tepper and her passing. And you said it was okay. We should talk about that, because
sure,
there's an important aspect to that.
Yeah. Well, there's so much we could say. Sally was just a phenomenal person, and she had her many struggles. Probably the most empathetic person I've ever met. Her instincts as a musician, and I do talk about this. I don't think it's very tempting as teachers to value our students for their musical ability or lack of, to kind of place their value based upon their abilities. I think that's a terrible mistake. I'm sure I made that mistake as a younger teacher. But Sally was a remarkable person and just happened to be a remarkable musician. I mean, she just was honest, and she played the way she was. So Sally could sound so happy and so amazing, and she could sound so sad in the way that just tore you up. And that was a lot of her life. So she was honest. And I say one of the most empathetic people. We had a kind of an online celebration reunion of a lot of Sally's friends on Zoom after she passed. And it was amazing. And all the stories were about whenever they needed something, she was the first one there. She gave and she gave and she gave. So we could go on and on about it, but it's I'm just so grateful that, and it's happenstance that she came into our lives at Baylor. Our former dean and his wife met Sally's mom when they got upgraded on American Airlines flying from Miami to Dallas, and started talking. And she said, "My daughter's the best high school trumpeter in Florida." And he's like, "Okay, yeah, sure." And then they conversed, and she came and auditioned at Baylor, and by golly, she was. And just an incredible person. So it's left a hole in the heart of everybody that knew her. And so we're making, the most of it. And one of the things we're doing is and if anybody's interested in contributing any amount, there's a new endowment fund in her name. You can simply Google Baylor Sally Tepper Fund, and it'll pop up. We planned on having this fully endowed by the end of this semester. And what it will do is it will help us bring in visitors who are experts in wellness. It's specifically for musician wellness. We live in a time where the students have grown up with perfectionism. They've grown up in the digital age, and there's this illusion of perfectionism that so many people are trying to achieve. So we're going to continue. Our dean is very good about bringing in folks to talk about these matters, and this will allow us to do more of that. And it will also go to help defray unexpected costs for families who have a student in distress, and a family needs some support to get here, or if there's some professional help that needs to be attained there. So I'm excited for that legacy, for just a beautiful person. It's been tough.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to talk to anybody. And there've been other losses. There's no doubt in my mind that with some of the sadness that's going around with the pandemic and society, that's exacerbated. Because I mean, if we're talking just trumpet, I'm not the only trumpet teacher that's lost a student in this way this year. And a couple very recently.
I think until you become a teacher, and it doesn't just have to be at the collegiate level, right? I mean, if you're
No.
a private teacher, though, there's an opportunity for a special kind of relationship. And I think it surprises students sometimes that we want to care and know more about them than just whether or not they made it through their scales or etudes for the week, right? I mean, you've got an opportunity, and what is it, 28 lessons a year over 4 years, or however, you calculate it. You've got these opportunities to make a connection with them and show them that there's more to this. And of course, that's, I think you have to be sincere about building these relationships. I think people could probably pick up very quickly
Oh,
if
yes.
you're just kind of
Yes.
going down the
Yeah.
checklist of, well, I'm going to ask him about this. All right, now scales, right? But I think,
That's right. The
but
timer goes off.
I think that's what makes our role as an applied teacher much more than just what it says on the paper. We're gonna teach them X, Y, and Z freshman year and sophomore year, right? I mean, this is.
Yeah.
And do you see this when students? Do you see this kind of realization with students when they're like, "Oh, this is something special. This is something different."
Yeah, it's really nice when that happens. It takes everybody's on a little bit different timetable with that. And this is where we just have to be so present with each student, because every minute is either moving towards that moment or pulling away from it. Every response, every sense of judgment, we have to push. I mean, I love stories, of Mark Gould pulling out a McDonald's application and handing it to the student because they haven't practiced. I think that's awesome. In with the right relationship.
Yes.
You can do anything based upon the relationship. And I talk about in the book, pretty frankly, about a couple of times I totally blew it, where I thought I had a certain level of relationship and I said or did something that we went back a long way, that I had to regroup with that student. So yeah, and it is really nice. And I think it happens with I mentioned already, with the laugh or the look in the eye, or when I mess up and they don't, and there's that, oh, I got him on that one. Or I'll mess up and it's their turn to play, and I'll say, this is your big chance, and they go for it. When you start being playful, and that's where that's what we discover, especially. I'll tell you, for us, I can only speak for us. The fast track for that is group improvisation, because you're conversing with your instruments and you're looking at each other and you're responding, and you don't have to be a master on the instrument to improvise well in this setting, and pick a different groove. And yeah, sometimes things become routine and, oh, we're doing that again. But if you can just somehow keep it fresh, the students who have gotten involved in that, and those who have fully embraced our chamber music program, they'll come back later and say, I had no idea this was unique or special till I left. And I have to remember that too. So that helps me to try to keep it fresh and fun.
That piques my interest about what that. I almost said that structured improvisation, right? I mean, that's that.
Yeah, right.
Right. Those terms don't go together.
That's a rough plan. Yeah.
But what does that actually look like? I mean, do you pick a jazz tune and everybody plays through the head and then
Yeah.
takes solos, or what is that?
No, it's we never play anything that's been written or played before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be any particular style. And as you work towards the end of the book, I go at length about how we do this. And we may have done this at that Ball State recital. I think we did a trumpet ensemble that was improvised. I could be wrong, but
no, I remember. I do. I remember this.
Yeah, we made that
terrific.
up, and people stood up. I mean, they clapped, and we bowed. So it was good enough. And so basically, we don't think about it till it happens. We'll go through our 30 or 40-minute call and response, no metronome, no tuner, just us call and response. And then I'll look at a student, I'll say, pick a key. One of our freshmen once said F natural major. That was a good key. So we did F natural major. Sorry, Luke. And, and okay, what meter? And then in the early stages, I'll start and I'll just decide if it's going to be fast or slow. Very often we'll do a chant. Let's just do Dorian, whatever. And so we'll just all play a short solo. And, the rule is basically just like comedians or actors. Tina Fey talks about it, somebody does something and you're improvising, you say yes. And then the next person says yes, and then it's like, well, what if? And this is what combos do, right? This is what we're doing tonight. You and I are improvising based upon some themes.
I know. This is so different than rehearsal yesterday. I know. This is
that's right.
We are so far off script. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's really, I think that for us, that's been the glue, because it could be aleatoric. It could be anything. And the lyrical ones are the ones that really stick. You kind of walk away going, ah. And there's no music and nobody's done this before. So they have no choice. Once they get comfortable, might take a little time for some, others fully embrace it. Suddenly, intonation is fantastic. They start to match articulation without any discussion of matching articulation. I mean, we could do this if we started scatting together and we didn't have latency, right? We could start matching each other exactly, and we would be improvising. And so this was just, I don't know, it's just been a real eye opener for me. And Kenny Werner's book, Effortless Mastery, was kind of planted the seed of thought for this. And then I heard Alan Alda talking about improvisation. And that was about the time I was improvising in recitals with students. And it's like, wow, this is for everybody. And traditionally, classical musicians shy away from it. And we miss out a lot. And it doesn't have to be jazz.
Marvin Perry, I don't know if you know Chappie, but he was principal trumpet with the Indianapolis Symphony for 43 years. Right. He was my teacher at Butler University. And I remember him telling me, and he would improvise, even though he was one of the strongest classical lyrical players. But he would say, you got to be like the jazzers. The jazzers have the best ears. They're the ones that listen and adapt the quickest. And that I immediately think about Mark Inouye. And I remember seeing Mark in recital where the first half was, the kind of, maybe not Artunian, but the legit.
Yeah. Gonna do and
then he came back in the second half with a combo and tore it up. And I'm like, well, there's no wonder that he's the musician that he is, right? Because he's got everything going and using his ears, using his, both sides of the brain, right?
And I'm sure he would say that informs, because that's what Kenny Werner says, I call it the spirit of improvisation. I mean, how can you transfer those sensibilities, that beauty to your classical music if you haven't experienced it creating it, creating music? And that's the whole idea, and that's one of the distraction things. Like, for instance, if a student is playing pictures and it's out of tune, because it usually is, and for silly reasons, by the way, I'm not going to get into that because they're adjusting the wrong notes, but
I know where you're coming from.
Improvise. Yeah. So I have them improvise, in that key and make up, play the rhythm if you want, but just play something kind of like pictures. And then either you decide or I'll point and go into pictures. And after they've improvised and they've established the creative side of the brain as being in charge, and they go into the excerpt, always remarkably better every time. And that's what Mark's doing when he plays, West Side Story with San Francisco.
Well, and back to Mark Gould, I think one of the funniest things was his Way of the Blade, where he was talking to God, right, or whatever.
Right. Lyrics.
But but he did something. He totally, you could call it an improvisation. He totally changed the context on that. So you stop thinking about triple tongue pattern and where's the crescendo going to be, and how long should I hold that half note, and da 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 da. Right now, you've got those lyrics in your head. How much easier does it make playing that opening solo, right? And I'm thinking now, I need to write lyrics to the lyric solo, right? Because, well, and maybe Mark already has, but we'd have to. It wouldn't be a PG show anymore, right? It would be very different. But I see the opportunity to include improvisation. I mean, this is going into my, as much as I can incorporate this semester. This is going in to what I'm gonna do.
It's awesome.
But there again, I think this is what I get excited about, is an opportunity. Ooh, maybe for another opportunity to get through to a student, right? This stuff might not reach every student, but there are ways that we try to find to reach, because you've got the tactile learners, the visual learners, the oral learners, and maybe some other people are just intuitive, right? You've got to find a way to make that connection.
Yeah, I have a list on another sticky note in the office. I'm an analog kind of guy, but some students, if you have them conduct the music that they're playing, they will suddenly play it better after they've conducted. It's like, okay, conduct it, and if it's Charlie A2, conduct the rubato so it is very clear to your ensemble or your soloist. Lyrics, definitely. In fact, at the clinic at Ball State, where you were, there was a gal that played boutade, and I have this towards the end of the book. I talk about writing lyrics, and she was very nervous. So as a group, we all came up with lyrics. I play trumpet. Yes, I do. It's very cool to play the trumpet. Very to play the trumpet. That is what I do. Play the trumpet, play the trumpet. So after we got her adrenaline evaporating and we created lyrics, she played it again beautifully after the whole audience sang it with her and the pianist. And what a great distraction. Orchestration. If they're struggling on an etude, then let's orchestrate it. Is this oboe or clarinet or violin? Okay, now this phrase. Dum dum da da dum. Well, obviously that's going to be like the brass section. Woodwinds. Dum dum da da dum. So orchestration or colors. Some students love colors. Okay, play me some red. What's this sound like blue? I mean, we could go on and on and on. The old buzz it, sing it, play it, conduct it, orchestrate it, color it, write lyrics for it. And you're right. Different things work for different people. Alex Bender. Oh, go ahead.
No, please. Alex Bender, you're talking about.
Well, Alex Bender, he's a real up and comer. If you don't know Alex Bender, look out. But he's a very successful New York player on Broadway. He actually had a role on the stage, and he's from Harrisburg. He's living in Chicago, teaching at a college there right now. But he's given a couple of great classes for us, and he's all about action verbs. And I'm not going to steal his thunder, but it was one of the most fantastic, one of the greatest responses to a class we've had. It was on Zoom, and everybody's muted, but he said, "Whatever you're working on for Mr. Rudd, play it." And then he showed us a list of words, and he said, "Now pick a word, and now play it, and play that word, play that action verb." And all my students reported back that they played it better. It just added, and we've been doing that. So I have that list in my studio, and he's going to write a book. He's going to write a book someday, and but hey, Alex Bender, 10% Alex.
I'll put that in the notes. Yeah, that's going right along with what I was going to say a second ago. Say play red, and maybe what they play. And I can remember I've tried to be very careful not to have somebody do that and then go, no, that's not red. Well, but
you don't know what red is.
But that's their red, right?
That's right.
And so maybe I'm going to say, okay, I look at red as this, right? So I'm going to have to define it a little more clearly. Otherwise, I'm going to have to accept what they play. That's right, because as soon as you're kind of shutting them down. No, that's not red. Well, now what? Now I have no idea of what I'm supposed to play, right? I can see that could be really detrimental. But sorry, I'm just.
No, that's good. We'll be here all night.
This is great. I never thought I would enjoy teaching as much as I do. I kind of happened into it. I mean, it wasn't like somebody forced it on me. I mean, it was, and I'm teaching at my alma mater too, which it was a
That's
very cool
sweet.
thing,
That's pretty
right?
sweet. Yeah.
Uh, but I was going to be a performer, right? That was my focus.
Mm-hmm.
And all of
Yep.
a sudden you start teaching, and also selfishly, it makes you better as a player,
Right.
right?
Don't you find that when you come back from a concert or a rehearsal with great musicians, your teaching is better, right? You're inspired, or you learn something new. I had
Mm-hmm.
a freshman ask me one time, because I did a week-long tour in the South doing recitals and master classes at 4 or 5 different universities. And that was new to her, me being gone for a week. Your
I
wife,
just
did you pay
no.
the bill?
You know what? It was on an external charger. This
There we
is
go.
so
And
we'll
I came back, and she said, why do you do that? Why do you leave us for a week? And I said, well, because I'm going to teach you better now. And I need to grow in that way. And I always learn something from those students and those professors I work with, and
mm-hmm,
witness another school of music. And I bring back something
mm-hmm,
that they shared. And I and
mm-hmm.
I have epiphanies while I'm driving to the next town. Right. That was life on tour. Daily epiphanies,
Yep.
and daily listenings and conversations. That's what fuels us. And don't you find that you just said it, your teaching makes you a better player.
Mm-hmm. And makes you a better teacher, right? I mean, it's a nice cycle, not a vicious cycle. It's a nice
Yeah.
cycle.
Yeah. We're very fortunate.
Vince DiMartino was my first teacher, and I mean, right? He's the best. But
Mm,
Lexington is not that far from Indianapolis, and so I've had Vinny up here to UIndy, but he's also come to Ball State, and
yeah.
anytime he's close, I go and try to get in his master class, and I still take notes. I shouldn't say
Yeah.
I never took notes when I was studying with him, but now I take notes, right?
Yeah.
But
And he takes notes too. He
yeah,
does.
yeah. But this
Mm,
is, and he's said some things. I'm like, oh, that's brilliant, because now again, back to being able to find something to relate to a student, right? It's like, oh, that's the phrase right there that's going to open
yep.
that door,
Yep.
or
Yep.
turn the lights on, or open their eyes, whatever, or it opened my eyes to something. But and there again, there's somebody who is a role model who continually strives to improve.
He's Vince is just he's like the Godfather now, right?
Hmm.
For all of us. And
Hmm.
but he's still a student, and he's just has this appetite for learning. And I mean, he gets so excited. And I shared with you last week, some of the
Hmm.
things that he did just for us in our little world as touring musicians.
Yeah.
Such an enthusiast, and such a, you know, I mean, I'll be honest, as a younger professional, sometimes in professional circles, some of the conventions or whatever, it was not always the happiest or healthiest supportive vibe. Trumpet players have been kind of famous for that over the years, but I
Hmm.
have to say that I think it's changed a lot over the years, and I think people like Vince are a big part of that. It's so welcoming, and he'll let you know what you can do right now to make it better. I mean, I have a couple of very
Hmm.
specific stories when we did some touring together. It's like, if you did that, it's like, oh, duh. I mean, he needs to publish all the little tidbits, Vince's tidbits or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, but he just puts you at ease, and he makes you. I don't know. He allowed me to trust myself more
Mm-hmm.
anytime he was around. I
Hmm.
mean, when you first play at some of these conventions and you're going, oh my gosh, there's so and so, and there's Vince, and there's like, and Vince has a way of allowing all that to just disappear.
You
Bobby
know,
Shue, it's the same way. It's kind of like he loves music.
hmm
He loves being moved by music, and that's what he tries to convey.
so I'm going to follow up on two things. I remember Grand Rapids ITG. This was probably 2013, 14, somewhere in that
Yeah.
neighborhood. Vince was part of, one of the big concerts that featured a lot of people. came out and played this beautiful cornet piece. He missed a note, and he turned and he went,
Yeah.
and just kept playing. And to me, that was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, that's how it should be. So what?
Yeah.
And I tell
Yep.
you what, there wasn't anybody that said, oh, I'm leaving. I can't believe this hack's trying to get, I mean, but to understand that, I mean, to think that, does Sergey ever miss a note? Does Alan Vizzuti ever miss a note? Well, okay. So we're talking about maybe not very many, and maybe not in performance either. But, it's like, that was just, to me, a great example of what you should do as a performer. And you mentioned Bobby Shue. I interviewed Bobby, and this has been kind of cool with several interviews. But Bobby and I email back and forth every week. He checks in on me. How you doing this week? How's your chops? I've had some chop issues recently, and here I am telling everybody about it. But I reached out to Wayne Bergeron and Bobby Shue, and both of them were. And Bobby keeps sending me stuff, PDFs. He's like, check this science out, check this, and and do this and do that. And I'm like, this is again what you would. Well, it's what I aspire to do. Is to be that kind of a giving.
They're just so generous. And Bobby and I had it was my good fortune to be together for a week in Colombia a few years ago. And I just ate it up. I mean, the stories were incredible, and then like a week after we got home, there's a big package full of DVDs that he sent me, and then he tried to buy my book. And I said, Bobby, I'm sending you a book. You're not buying this. You gave me all this stuff. And a week after he gets the book, another set of CDs. And, these guys are so generous.
Yeah.
They're just phenomenal.
And, it's, I want to go back and okay, so it's not that I'm out to name drop, but, I've had the good fortune to talk to a lot of people and make a lot of friends over the last few years. But so a couple of days ago, I called Doc. I do love being able to say that. So I called Doc. Actually, I called Kathy. And Doc picked up her phone. So I ended up talking to Doc for a little bit. And he asked me, he goes, how's your chops today? I said, they're great. How are yours? Yeah, well, I haven't figured it out yet. He goes, sometimes I look at that horn and I think, should I just put it in the case and never touch it again? And then he goes, nope, never going to happen. Now, again, here's a 93-year-old who has nothing else to prove, right? One of the greatest living musicians, and striving still. He told me he's just started the Tebow routine or warm up. I mean,
he's amazing.
How do you respond to that?
He's always been a student.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, this appetite for knowing something else. I remember we were on tour, Dallas Brass Days, and we had a day off. So we went to hear him with it was in Orange County. So he was directing the orchestra there. We got there early, hoping to meet him, and we're walking up the loading dock, acting like we know what we're doing so they don't stop us, right? And we walked in and we could hear him backstage and this was mid-90s. Unbelievable sound coming out the doors before we opened them. And that's when he had these bel canto trumpets, or bel canto, as some people call them.
Right.
He had like 12 trumpets lined up. And we introduced ourselves, and he said, oh, so you're trumpet players. So listen, tell me which one you like. So, we weren't 10 feet away in the blast zone. But, the thing about that sound was that it didn't hurt. And you didn't want to do this because it was so resonant and commanding. And he I don't know how many hours he played that afternoon. And then he played and conducted the show that night. And it was just incredible. But I got to hear him live as I was a kid growing up in Houston. He would come play at the local high school every year, and with his fancy suits,
Yeah.
Such an inspiration.
So I'm coming up on 100 episodes. I've actually got 143 done. Number 87 came out yesterday, but I've got 143 done. But Doc, I did a third actually interview with him recently, and it was in the 130s. And I thought, no, I'm going to move him up. He's going to be number 100. He's going to be that capstone for that.
That's great.
But there are stories that he tells in there that I'm thinking, I wonder, and I'm sure he's told them many times, but to me, it's what makes Doc special.
Yeah.
And I think what a great spokesman for humanity, for music, for trumpet, of course. But yeah, so, and that's not that far away, right?
That's
I'm
great.
number 87. So
That's great.
I was sitting here, I'm thinking, man, Wiff, we could go all night.
Sure.
But I'm looking over here just to double check, see if there's any questions. There are a lot of people just saying they appreciate and love what you're saying. David, help me out. Tkach?
David Tkach. Yeah. So
Tkach.
his son Joey is studying now at the Colburn School with Jim Wilt, virtually, of course. But Joey graduated from Baylor last year. Phenomenal young talent. And so, yeah, Vince loaned Joey his trumpet for a jazz concert at Interlochen because Joey did Interlochen 2 or 3 summers.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, great guys.
Well, I think what's going to happen is we have to actually do an interview, right? Not a live thing, but we may have to schedule a time.
Sure.
When we can just sit and do some more of this, or we may have to do another live event if you're up for it at some point.
It's a pleasure.
But this has been a treat. It's to get to meet you, chat with you, and learn a lot from you. This has been great. And when I go back to edit this stuff, it's like I realize I can see how much I've been smiling through this whole thing. But during the edit process, it's like, oh my gosh, that was brilliant. That's when I can really start to process what happened. So I'm looking forward to going through this again. Hey, everybody that was here tonight, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. I know Wiff appreciates it. And this has been kind of cool as this stuff goes out on YouTube and the podcast platform tomorrow. I've noticed that, maybe only a few dozen here tonight, but these have been getting 100 or 200 views the following day. So it's like,
great.
Which I'm thrilled. I think this has been some great conversation, and people are going to know, if they don't know you already, they're going to know an awful lot more about you. So,
well, thanks for doing this, and this is part of building community. I appreciate your generosity.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you for writing the book. What a terrific resource! What a terrific contribution to the studios and to a personal library. I'm thrilled that I've got it. Thank you for the inscription in the front. I appreciate that. It means I can never sell it in a book in a garage sale. I'm going to have to hold on to it, right?
I tell people if I know them, I'll say, "Can I sign it for you?" But I always say it could lower the value, so feel free to say no.
No. I think if anything, it raises the value on that. So, where can people get your book?
Oh, they can do it through Amazon. I also sell it on my website, which is just wiffrudd.com. I also have a bundle deal there. It has my collaborative practice book. So there's a special price for those combined. There are a few universities that are using this for like brass literature and pedagogy classes. If anybody is ever interested in a group sale, they just can contact me directly through the website. And this is I do make sure that some of the proceeds go to the Sally Tepper Fund, as well as the Ryan Anthony Foundation or Cancer Blows. Those are the two foundations that I want to keep supporting, through this effort, because both those people were so special in my life.
I had the good fortune to interview Ryan and to meet him, and oh my gosh. Well, grateful that the world had him as long as we did, but his legacy is certainly living on, not just through Cancer Blows, but through all the people that he worked with, taught, played with. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Larry.
And good luck with or best wishes, I should say, with your studio this semester and beyond.
Same to you and all the other folks.
Yeah, guys, again, thanks for being here. Don't forget, tomorrow night, Carl Hammond of Hammond Design, and David Messina, Erica Howard of Messina Covers. That's going to round out my Industry Pro Showcase for this week. And you can, of course, studiohfl.com. I'm trying to throw all the stuff in here before we take off. But again, thanks for being here as an audience. Wiff, thank you very much. I wish you good health, and hopefully we'll meet sometime soon.
We will. Thank you so much.
You bet.
All the
best.
All right.
Wiff, hang on one second.